Hello, welcome to the Paranormal Peep Show with myself, Neil Geddes-Ward, and Andrew Chaplin. Andy, how are you?
Yeah, not too bad. I'm hoping the fan isn't going to get picked up because in Britain, for a change, summer is actually quite warm and quite sweltering.
Yeah, actually, funny enough, I bought a fan today and I had to assemble it. I was really surprised. I had to assemble it. I thought I could literally just get it out of the box and stick it on the top and plug it in. But no, I had to assemble it. And I'm thinking, what's wrong with these people? You know, they give you a fan. Why? I mean, when I buy a car, I don't assemble the car. You buy
Unless
it
it's a
as a
kit
car.
car. Well,
Well,
if there are kit cars.
a bit like Kit Kat.
Yeah, a bit like Kit Kat, which moves me nicely onto the subject of the Mandela effect. I've just come back actually last night from the UFO Academy, which for anyone who's unaware is basically a group of people who meet up in a fantastic manor house in Watford for something called the UFO Academy Talks, and it was a weekend-long talks. There was about 3 or 4 speakers each day. I only went to the Sunday one. And they had loads of people talk about loads of things like ley lines, UFOs, supernatural incidents, and the Mandela effect. And Simon Parkes, who's one of my favourites, probably the best speaker in my opinion at the events, went into the Mandela effect. Anyone who's unaware of that, it's basically, for some reason, space-time seems to be splitting off into different parallel universes, is the theory, where different slight tweaks, slight glitches in the matrix occur, where you swear you remember it one way on any given thing, and then you find out it's something completely different. So, for instance, for anyone who wants to kind of Google the Kit Kat logo, if you have a look at the modern logo from Nestle, Kit Kat does not have a dash in the middle. There's no hyphen and there's no dash. And yet I firmly remember when I was growing up in the 80s and the 90s, Kit Kat always had a dash. It had a dash between the lower T. There's kind of a gap between the lower T and the big K. There's a little dash in there. Now I remember that Kit Kat it's hyphenated, and it could be argued, oh, maybe it's kind of like a modern day logo. Maybe kind of like they've updated it a bit more sleek, a bit more modern, get rid of the dash. So I had a look at some of the old rappers, some of the 1980s, 1970s rappers. It's never had a dash that I can see.
Did people kind of agree with that at the
Yes,
Academy?
yeah. I mean, it's for people wanting to search the Mandela effect. Go onto YouTube, type in Kit Kat Mandela effect. In fact, I shall do that now whilst we're talking, not so much on YouTube, but on Google Images. So Kit Kat logo. Let's have a look. Have a look at images, and all of them except one actually. All of them don't have a dash except one, where I don't recognise that at all. There's one with a completely red background and yellow writing, which is not the proper Kit Kat logo. I don't remember bars ever being like that. But all of the old ones, all of the 1980s ones, the 1970s ones, they've all are without a dash. So that's one example of the Mandela effect. The other one that Simon Parkes went into was a bit of a strange one. I'm not quite sure on it. The JFK car, were there 6 people or were there 4 people in it? Was it JFK and his wife and the driver and a security guard, or was it JFK, his wife, the driver, the security guard, and a governor and his wife? And if you look into that, the 1961 Lincoln that he drove doesn't appear to have that much room to fit an extra couple of people in. And even when you kind of look at the actual official images, there's just no seating for an extra couple of people. And it looks like where they were seated in the official photo, they would be kind of like into the footwell. There'd be not enough space. So it's a strange one. The Mandela effect continually does my head in, Neil. I can't cope with it.
In my world, I mean, I remember it was Lee Harvey Oswald driving, eating a Kit Kat.
Yeah.
But yeah, from what I recall of it, Governor Connolly was hit by the magic bullet theory, which was his bullet that went through one person into another one and then bounced off. And, you know, they were trying to pin it down to one gunman, i.e. Lee Harvey Oswald, rather than other lone gunmen around the vicinity type of thing, you know. But
I've got an interesting claim to fame on this one. It's a kind of minor claim to fame. I won't mention his name because it probably wouldn't be fair, but I know the son of the doctor who was the first doctor at the Texas hospital where JFK's body was brought in. He was the first person to kind of, I don't know if diagnose is quite the right word, to give an official account of what happened, or officially kind of acknowledge JFK's body coming to the Texas hospital.
I kind of have memories of you saying this once before, and I forgot about it, funny enough. Yeah.
So this is Dr. Caruco, and I can say that because that's in the public domain. Dr. Caruco. Now he said that he believed that the official line of the direction of where the bullet was coming from was not his opinion correct. He thought the bullet came from the opposite direction. So I can't remember if JFK was shot from behind or the front, but whichever direction was the official, in quotes, explanation for it, Dr. Caruco actually thought no, it wasn't. So
that's a whole subject in itself, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, yeah, paranormal worlds of JFK. It's very interesting stuff though out there on it. I mean, there was a guy, I forget his name, that he kind of tuned in, like remote viewed into the past, was given coordinates and locations and everything, and he remote viewed into the past. And gave a full account of the JFK assassination, not realising it was the assassination that he was asked to remote into. Very interesting. I think it's on YouTube, actually. But anyway, so the Mandela effect. I mean, in the past then, you could say, Britain won the war, or we didn't win the war, and things like that. The Nazis won it, and just like the Man in the High Castle, which was on Netflix, I think, or Amazon Prime. Very interesting. The alternative where Japan and Germany won the Second World War
could well be. I mean, how do we know that there's not other parallel universes out there that are physically where the Nazis literally did win and are stomping around in jackboots everywhere?
Well, that's right. That's exactly right. I mean, we can now bring in our guest who possibly could answer that, but I think we're going to actually discuss other things that the Nazis possibly also got up to, but that's not officially recognised, but there's hints of it creeping into the mainstream, into the world of model kits and things like that, because Antifa
ideology as well.
Yeah, Ben, welcome Ben Emlyn-Jones back to the Paranormal Peep Show. Are you there, Ben?
Hello, Ben.
I am. Hello, Andy. Hello, Neil. How are you?
We are fine. How are you coping with the heat, Ben?
All right, actually. Well, I mean, when I'm working in it, obviously it's like a bit of a drag, but because I work outdoors a lot, gardening and things like that, but generally at home I'm coping all right. I think I've acclimatized now. But I actually was I went to a cooler place. I spent the last 5 days in Newcastle upon Tyne, which is in the northeast of England. And I spent. I was going to spend 4 days there, and then go to the UFO Academy where Andy went. And then I ended up. I couldn't buy a ticket, so I wasn't sure whether to risk trying to get a press pass or not. And I wanted to go because I was going to meet up with people. I was really looking forward to it. In the end, the people, the organisers of the event in Newcastle, asked me to stay on another day, so I did.
Popular man, then. Popular man. Perhaps the best decision you made, maybe. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's much cooler there, I'll tell you, than it's down here.
I bet it is.
Ben,
I got off the coach in Oxford, and I thought I was stepping into a sauna.
Ben, do you remember Kit Kat when you were growing up? Did it have a hyphen or did it not have a hyphen?
I honestly, Andrew, I was listening to your intro and I can't remember. But one thing I am certain of, I am a Looney Tunes guy when it comes to the Mandela effect.
Yes.
I'm absolutely 100% certain. And I know because I've heard people talk about Looney Tunes. I said, no, it's Tunes. This was long before I'd heard of the Mandela effect. And I'm 100% certain it was Looney Tunes for me. So that's really weird, the whole Mandela effect thing. Yeah, it's a great subject.
The idea, I think, is kind of like the possibility that this Large Hadron Collider, this CERN machine, might be somehow fiddling around inadvertently, whether deliberately or non-deliberately, and playing around with timelines and possibly shifting us without us even realizing it into kind of split dimensions. I mean, here's something that will kind of do your head in, Ben and Neil. You probably won't view reality the same ever again. How do you know that when you wake up, you're waking up into the same world that you went to sleep in the previous night?
I have always wondered this, actually. It's something, one of these things I've always questioned, because I'm very interested in the idea of the many universes theory, which is a bit like the Mandela effect, you know. I think it's probably talking on the same lines. But yeah, you go to sleep, you know, say you astral travel, you go out your body, you might come back into a different universe of yourself, you know, the alternate Neil, the alternate Andy, the alternate Ben, and things look all the same, but then suddenly Kit Kats are changed, but you don't quite know it, you know. They might taste the same.
It might be something, as long as they taste the same, that's all right, because I love them.
You know you're definitely in the right world of sorts if they taste the same. Who cares? Definitely. Who cares about the logo or where Governor Connolly sat, as long as the Kit Kat tastes the same?
Yeah, but you know what? It's funny that Andrew, you mentioned the Large Hadron Collider. I don't know if there is a distinct connection between this, but however, the stories of the Mandela effect only began actually when I think it was was her name Laura Broom? I think her name was somebody Broom.
Yeah.
She published her article on it, and that's really what started it all off. But this was, I think, in 2014. It was quite recent.
Oh.
And it was only after the Large Hadron Collider started working.
Well, I've had mini Mandela effects all my life, actually, and I just put it down to must have remembered it wrong. For instance, I sometimes scream at the television when a celebrity has been announced as having died, sadly. And I scream, that person's already dead. They've been dead for years. A few examples, for instance, Super Smashing Great, Bullseye presenter Jim Bowen. He died technically this timeline about 2 years ago, I think it was. I thought he died 10, 15 years ago. The same with Rene from Hello Hello. I thought he died about 15 or 20 years ago. Nope, apparently that was about 2 or 3 years ago. Grotbags from the Pink Windmill Show. I thought she died many years ago. No, again, that was about a year ago. Have you had that, Ben, where you've kind of like a celebrity has been announced as dead, and you thought that person died years ago?
It's happened several times actually, and I mean, this is you mentioned people. You mentioned that people remember things wrongly, and that's true. Human memory is faulty. And people remember things wrongly. It's called conflation, and it happens to be all the time. And I mean, you just have to watch a movie you haven't seen for 20 years and just see how different it is to how you remember it. The thing about the Mandela effect is you get large numbers of people conflating the same thing.
This is it. This
shouldn't be possible. Because conflation is a completely internal affair and should be unique. Every single error should be unique to the person remembering it. Now, I'm one of millions of people who are Looney Tunes guys across the world. Millions. Yeah. But it is Looney Tunes. I've checked. It was always Looney Tunes from 1939 to 1969. The whole series, it was Looney Tunes. Looney Tunes.
Yeah.
What about then the fact that you say you come back into this world and you say, but hang on, you know, Mandela did die in such and such a year, or Jim Bone from Bullseye did die in whatever year. You know, the thing is, your mind or memory hasn't changed with the changed universe, and
you've got the same memories.
You've got the same memories of some history of something, but somehow your whatever as
in the wrong timeline.
In the wrong timeline, and memory should change with it.
This is what Simon Parkes was saying. Simon Parkes was saying that the reason the memories don't change with it is because your soul memory is stored etherically, whereas we're in a physical universe where because our memories, where the spiritual theory goes, our memories are not stored in the brain. The brain is like a processing unit, but it's not where the memories are sourced. It's a bit like a computer being the processing unit, but accessing the internet, and the internet being stored somewhere else. So our memories could be true for another parallel universe, but they're not true for this physical parallel universe that we're in now.
It's like a cloud rather than a hard drive.
A cloud.
Oh, I see.
Well, it makes sense because I mean the scientists keep saying that they can't quite work out these things, even though scientists have learned an awful lot of good knowledge about how the brain works. But there's still many mysteries associated, and this is one of them. And for people who have these memory, and the people remember the same things. You see, when they remember things wrong, they remember the same things. The people who remember Nelson Mandela dying in 1986, they said he died. Some of them remember the date. They said it was the month in 1986. They remember the news reports on TV. They remember reading it in the papers. Nelson Mandela dies in jail, and they remember it in great detail in some cases.
It's bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah, very.
Scarily disturbing.
Talking of super strange technology like the Hadron Collider, Ben, you're going to talk to us about kind of like Nazis and their space technology and possibly bases on the moon. So, and that was actually one of the things that came up in the UFO Academy talks about Die Glocke, the bell, and their kind of, and you're probably aware of the kind of like hexagon or octagon type concrete structure with cables in it. That you know, the official story is that it's just a water tower. But some people speculate it might have been holding kind of like some kind of captured UFO. I don't know if you want to go into that at all.
Well, of course, I'm happy to talk about this. Although someone will no doubt call me a Nazi for talking about it. But it's been 3 days since someone last called me a Nazi, so I knew that. I knew my break had to end at some point.
Can I explain?
Ben, anyone slightly to the right of Joseph Stalin these days is a Nazi.
Well, there we go then. I'll explain first of all then to listeners how this Nazi thing came about. Is this that I myself were interested in models, particularly science fiction models, kits and things like that. And I get this email from time to time from a company called Wonderland Models up in Edinburgh in Scotland, where they sell a whole range of kits. So, and one of the emails was a promotional thing for a Nazi flying saucer kit. And I thought, oh, cool, that's really good. I'll have a look at that. Oh, I might have to put that on my wish list or something, you see. And I thought, oh, Ben Emlyn Jones might be interested. I'll send it to him and see what he thinks, you know. And if you remember rightly, Ben, I sent you that email and said, have a look at this. And you thought, wow. And it was depicted as a Nazi flying saucer from World War II, and then about a month later, Andy, if you recall, you had seen something about the very same kit being banned from the shelves or removed from the shelves because it didn't portray history as it really was, because it wasn't put forward as a kit of fiction or fantasy or anything like that. It was put forward as historical. And so they whipped it, Revell, who made the kit, whipped it off the shelves. And so I made inquiries back to Wonderland Models in Edinburgh and say, do you still have this kit? And they said, no, we've had to withdraw it from our shelves. And that's really where the idea of this Tonight Show has sprung from, really, about did the Nazis really have flying saucers? And I know that Ben's got a greater knowledge on these things than myself. So Ben, what was your take on first of all the kit issue? Because you sent me another link to a YouTube video where another company has brought out a similar UFO flying saucer Nazi kit, haven't they?
That's right. Well, luckily, the Nazi flying saucer can be ordered from several different companies, and they haven't all blocked the sales and withdrawn the actual sales of this particular kit. It's only Revell so far of the companies that produce this who've actually withdrawn it. And I think that may be because Revell is partly based in Germany. It's based in the United States and in Germany. And it was pressure. It was a lot of political pressure put on the company by several people who run museums, and there was a child protection organization on top of them, because this kit is apparently marketed at ages 12 and up. Yet it has Nazi regalia on it, which is against the law in Germany. It also has I think it portrays the Nazis as highly technologically advanced, which of course they were. Even official history recognizes that the Nazi Germany was far advanced technically than any other country on earth. They were building, in the official world, they were building rockets, liquid-fueled rockets, which the V2, which caused terrible destruction in London and other cities. And the V1, which was a cruise missile, it was a jet-propelled cruise missile, which it was, again, this was cutting-edge technology in the 1940s. Now, at the end of World War II, when the Nazi regime was destroyed, the victorious Allies appropriated all this technology and back-engineered a lot of it, and including some of the actual personnel. They actually captured some of the personnel involved. These are scientists who worked for the Nazis. Some of them went to the Soviet Union. Some of them went to Britain, but the United States got the lion's share of them, and they were basically told, you have to come and work for us. It's not an option. You either come and work for us, or you go to Nuremberg and probably to the gallows. So they didn't have much of a choice. And the most famous of these people is Werner von Braun, who built the rockets, the NASA's rockets, which went into space. But so, again, there's a long story behind this, but we don't know whether the United States and the other allies actually captured some of the flying saucer technology as well. But the records have, there is a cover-up over this, a very old cover-up over this issue, which is why so many people are saying, well, it's simply not true. It's just a conspiracy theory. And along with that, there's this political bloc in Germany itself, where basically it's rather like a serious and very tragic version of the Faulty Towers comedy, you know, Don't Mention the War. And they really have they just can't. I think Germans just seem unable to get over this dark period of their history, which is a shame. I think they should let it go. It's time for closure, I would say. But there are a number of people who've actually done some research, not in Germany itself, where they can't really, but they've done it in Poland, and they've done it in Czechoslovakia and other places, or former Czechoslovakia, and many other places. And they found lots of documents. They found photographs, which is what the model is based on. That there are photographs that appear genuine, which are dated to that time period. And there's all kinds of certain personnel, such as Kammler, SS General Kammler, Hans Kammler, who worked on this. Now, this was done commercially. There was a secret project to develop it, but it was actually developed by several companies, including BMW and Skoda. Now, Skoda, of course, is a Czech company, but the Nazis actually occupied what is today the Czech Republic, where Skoda is based. And indeed, the last flying saucer is said to have been built very close to the end of the war in 1945 by Skoda, and it was test flown. Now, the propulsion system and power plant of these craft is not what powers and propels most aircraft, or indeed any other vehicle that we're familiar with. There's talk of what's called as Vril power. Now, there was an occult secret society which was behind the Nazis, called the Vril Society, and there was a lot of research into what we today call free energy technology. This is something that was outside Nazi Germany, was ruthlessly covered up right through from the late 19th century, when Nikola Tesla began publishing his research into free energy, and the idea that basically you don't have to get energy from fossil fuels. You don't need oil, you don't need coal. These things you dig up and have to pay a lot of money for and damage the environment, they're not necessary. At the same time, things such as solar power, wind power, and these other rather inefficient alternatives are also not necessary, as is nuclear fission energy, which is also very, very polluting and very dangerous. You can actually get energy from the fabric of the universe itself. You can actually obtain the usable energy. You could take energy from the very workings of space-time and convert it into usable electrical power and motive power, using various different methods that have been developed by many, many scientists, starting in the late 19th century and going up to the present day. But the answer is, and why don't we have it? Why are we not using it today? And that the answer to that is long and it's complicated, but it comes down to money and power and political agendas. So that's an overview of what we're talking about. This is one of the reasons that I think this is maybe one of the reasons why the war started in the first place, and why this technology was seized.
So, if I understand it, obviously Operation Paperclip was the one that took the Nazis over to, who ended up in the American space program and the Russian space program. The Russians called it something else, but basically the Americans took Werner von Braun and some of his team over. I think the Russians ended up with more of the engines and the rockets technology rather than the personnel. But would it be true to say then that von Braun was either not privy to this secret flying saucer technology, the fact that he was so solely obsessed with rocketry?
Yeah, he was a rocket scientist, and then the term rocket scientist is used for anyone who's intelligent nowadays. It dates back to von Braun because he became a household name in the United States. His record in the war was basically deleted. I mean, he's a man who should have been a war criminal, because he did fire these rockets at innocent people, most notably in our country, Britain. And many people alive today have lost relatives in the past thanks to this kind of technology, which is a war crime. But my guess is there's no reason to think that he was involved in this. I mean, the names who come up when it refers to this particular project, he's not on that list of names. There's someone called Igor Witkowski, a Polish guy who's actually researched this, and a British researcher called Nick Cook as well. We don't know what happened to the actual project itself. Can't prove that this was actually the project was actually taken over and back engineered by the Allies. We know that SS General Hans Kammler disappeared at the end of the war. Now, a lot of people disappear in war, missing in action. There's lots of names unaccounted for. But it's odd that this guy in particular disappeared. Now, there's several people related who have come out as witnesses to secret projects, Area 51 and other places, who have said, yes, I knew these people. They were Nazis. They were brought over. They lived in the United States under false identities. Now, unlike Werner von Braun, who was operating openly under his own name, a lot of these guys worked under fake identities, according to these witnesses. And it's not just there's also mind control and things like that. There's a guy called Mengele, Joseph Mengele, who's involved in mind control and biological experiments. He also had a fake identity and worked in the United States.
He became Dr. Green, I think, Ben.
Yes, according to Arizona Wilder. Yes, it was Dr. Green. So it's quite feasible that this is the case. If the fact is there was a large the word of secret experiments involving anti-gravity and free energy propulsion systems and power plants began to leak out at this time period. I mean, a lot of it could have come from crashed extraterrestrial sources as well, such as the Roswell incident. But we know that in 1943 Nikola Tesla died, and before the undertakers were even allowed into his hotel room where he was living, penniless, this poor guy. He was 77 years old, didn't have a bean except for his hotel bill. The undertakers weren't even allowed to take the body away. The FBI put a tape across the door, and they took everything he had, all his papers, all his books, all his prototypes, all his blueprints. So there's every reason to suspect that this is going on, and there are times when it does peak above the surface. And 9/11 is a good example, because Dr. Judy Wood and Andrew Johnson, I know we know these guys. We know Andrew very well, Neil, because he comes to High Wycombe Paranormal. I think they have proved beyond any doubt now that a weaponized version of Tesla technology was deployed on 9/11 to destroy the Twin Towers. And that's one example of this. So it's almost like we're looking at a stream of technology. And there's Timothy Good has written about how, to begin with, there was Thomas Townsend Brown and these other people from about 1910 to about 1920. There was a certain amount of public anti-gravity research allowed. But it was around about the beginning of World War II that it all went quiet. And so it's almost like it's disappeared, but then it pops up again. It's like trying to follow a submarine. It's there. You can see the periscope coming up occasionally, but you can't see the whole thing. So this is an intriguing story, and I think there is real reason to believe that it's true. And I think that the people at Dresden Museum who said that the Haunebue is not a real thing, and that's one of the reasons why they wanted Revell to withdraw it. Revell caved in, unfortunately, which is a shame. But I think it's very premature for them to say, "Oh, this just simply doesn't exist."
It's an interesting thing, because I mean the fact that these stories of Nazi flying saucers and the bases where they supposedly made it have been running around, especially on the internet, for quite a few years, and there's references in a few books about it. So obviously someone at Revell thought, well, let's make a flying saucer of the German thing, because there was obviously a lot of interest in this. Let's do one. They obviously done it with a commercial thought behind it. Let's make some money out of this.
It's quite encouraging, really, isn't it?
But it is actually, yeah. And then for some, I mean, the thing is that Revell, you're talking about the fact that they're a bit sensitive to the German things. I don't know what the marketing side of Revell is in Germany, but obviously Revell over the years have produced many Nazi mainstream kits, the Messerschmitt, for instance, kit, and things, and tanks, German tanks and German soldiers, model kits of those. So it's a strange thing that they've caved in under this one. But I do understand from what the email from Wonderland Models, the kit shop in not Germany, in Edinburgh, said to me, that they are going to reissue this kit. I think October this year in 2018. But with repackaged description that it's a fantasy kit as such.
Right in time for Oktoberfest.
Well, that's right. Yeah.
I think it's important to say that we are not, and I'm pretty sure Revel are not endorsing the Nazis in any way when we're talking about this. This is not kind of like, isn't it fantastic that Nazis could have produced UFOs? We're coming at just from a factual point of view, that they were interested in UFO technology, or at least kind of flying saucer technology. But it's in no way an endorsement of that from our point of view.
Oh yeah, I totally agree.
So Ben,
we have to put out that out there, Ben, just for any kind of precious snowflakes who might bite in and call us Nazis.
They won't stop them, unfortunately. And as David Icke said, if you deny it, that's just code that you're admitting it. If you admit it, then you're just admitting. It's like Brian trying to deny he's the Messiah in Monty Python. Yeah,
everyone's against us.
But it's fascinating. It's a fascinating thing that, I mean, I'm glad they're reissuing it. I really am.
Yeah. Now, the other thing I was going to mention, Ben, is that obviously one of the interesting facets of the V1 and V2, obviously it was designed as rockets to, land on London and blow the hell out of Britain and things like that, is that actually more people died making those weapons of destruction than actually were killed by them. Typically they used Jewish prisoners of war in concentration camps, and they were shipped out to secret areas around Germany, and I forget the places now, these very remote places in woodlands and things in northern Germany, etc. And they had to change the locations sometimes because the Allies would find out where they were making these and bomb them, and so they'd move it to another base or something. But lots and lots of Jewish concentration camp people died as a result of actually making these things. They died of exhaustion or accidents and things like that. So it makes me wonder that perhaps if this Nazi UFO flying saucer was made, again, Jewish concentration camp people were perhaps involved in the making of it, and there must have been people that started to talk about it, after those war years, for these rumours to surface.
It's funny you brought this up, Neil, because a couple of months ago I came across a story. I actually wrote about this. It's about an underground chamber beneath Germany that is allegedly, it's actually closed to the public today, but is allegedly part of some secret project the Nazis were working on. And they did use slave labor from a nearby concentration camp. It's not just Jews. There were some members of the Communist Party and people like that who'd been arrested and interned. But these people were deliberately killed before being returned to the camps, because they would use people in shifts. They would take some people. What the normal practice was, that people would be taken from concentration camps for a labor pool. There'd be a slave labor pool, and very often they'd work for a period of time, and then they'd be returned to their camp. But this is certainly the case with the V1 and V2 factories and various other war material factories that were going on. The difference is with this particular base that the prisoners were never returned. They were actually killed. They were killed and not returned to their camp. And the reason they weren't returned to the camp is because it's quite obvious that the people who are running this particular factory didn't want them talking about it to the other prisoners. Now, I found out about this through a memorial fund. There's actually a campaign to actually memorialize and put up a plaque for all these people who were killed, who were murdered by the regime. But it makes absolutely no mention of any of the points that I've just made. It doesn't talk about secrecy. It doesn't question what might have been made in that secret factory. There's no campaign to actually have the factory opened. There's an awful lot of other places around Germany that are still close to the public, which date back to the Nazis. There's a thing called Project Riese, which the Germans started. Now, Riese means giant in Germany, and it actually consists of some huge tunnels, really big. I mean, this is a project on the scale of the Channel Tunnel. That's how huge these underground excavations are. A lot of them are flooded now. They're underwater. You can't get into them. But the ones that are remaining are very, very strictly guarded. They are sealed off, and you can't get through. These were actually in the Harz Mountains, which is close to the border of what's now the Czech Republic. So a good question would be, I mean, for people in modern Germans would say, well, why are you not letting us see these things? I know, all right, the Nazis was a bad deal, but it's still a part of our history. And what's down there you don't want us to see? I mean, apart from the safety issue to do with the flooding and things like that, surely there must be some way of obtaining information about these places. So there's on top of all these stories leaking out, there's also the fact that the modern German government are not that keen to actually enlighten people in what really happened if what they're saying happened, these fantasy saucers they call them, weren't built. Weird, isn't it?
I mean, two things that come to mind. One is that there's possibly concentration camp people that were building these saucers, V1s, V2s, that were probably writing in diaries or something, one or two of them, not all of them, that might have been passed back to people somewhere or other, because they probably had an inkling that they weren't going to survive, but they still maybe wanted to get the word out in some way to other people, whether it was written in a code that the Nazis wouldn't be able to decipher or was secreted back to other people. Maybe that's how the word got out. But the other side of that coin is that if you are going to kill the people that are working on your flying saucer or V1 or V2 or whatever it is, you're actually killing. You're actually creating a problem, because those people know how to do the job, and as soon as you kill them, you try and put in another load of concentration camp members. They don't know anything, and you've got to start it all again and train them from the word go, and they've all got to make mistakes and things, which slows down the project. You'd think that there should be a continuity of sorts.
You have to train up a new work pool every single time. Which, I mean, for people like myself who worked in the NHS, and this is actually a problem that is faced with us, because staff turnover is so fast that you have to train up new people continuously, and they don't kill people yet who leave the NHS. Well, I don't want to give them ideas if they're listening, but the fact of the matter is, it seems that as far as these secret projects went in Germany, they prioritize secrecy over efficiency, even in wartime, which is very, very interesting indeed.
Now, what is the real best evidence that we've got for these Nazi flying saucers? I have seen some footage on YouTube, whether it's a CGI thing, but it looked like it was Berlin or something like, I can't remember, some very old scratchy black and white film. And I seem to recall, this was a few years ago now, not recently, I seem to recall something that looked like the George Adamski, because this is what this saucer looks like, interesting. It looks like the George Adamski UFO lifting out from some location in a city, flying a few feet and then descending again. Have you seen that one?
I haven't seen that one. I mean, there's a huge number of, unfortunately, obviously fake imagery going around on YouTube of things like this. It's made to look like scratchy old films. The best evidence, I would say, there's some photographs of the Haunabu, which look genuine. There's also what Witkowski has discovered. Now, he's examined the Wenceslas mine site. Now, this is something, and Andrew, you mentioned this at the beginning, the thing that people say was part of a cooling tower for a power plant. Okay, this concrete structure known as the fly trap
thing. Yeah. Oh, the fly trap. Yeah, that's what it's called. Yeah.
Now, he's examined that site, and he's found all kinds of strange tunnels leading down from it. He's found the remains of electric wiring, which date back to the period of the occupation. There was all kinds of I can't remember the whole story, but I did see a speech by Witkowski, who spoke at a conference a couple of years ago where I was speaking too, and very, very interesting indeed. Doesn't look like you wouldn't have that if it was simply a normal power station with a cooling tower, and you wouldn't have that. Now, there is a mine there called the Wenceslas mine, which is said to have been used to develop various types, a different kind of propulsion system called the Bell. You mentioned it at the beginning, a Die Glocke or Die Bienenstock. Bienenstock means beehive, and it is said to be because of the sound it made, which was like a bees buzzing. And the thing about it is, we don't know, because the entrance to the mine was blown up. It was actually caved in deliberately to seal off the interior of the mine. And it's never been excavated to this day. It's very dangerous because of the explosives did damage to the walls, and no one has ever put up the resources necessary to re-examine that site. But they were very, very keen that the Allies wouldn't get a hold of this particular project, even though they couldn't stop them appropriating some of the others.
But of course, at the end of the Second World War, the Allies moved into Germany, and what then transpired was it became East and West Germany, where the Russians had the eastern sector and the Americans and the British controlled the western sector. Now, you'd wonder why they want to control it so much. You could argue that it was just to dampen and quell any Nazis that might be left over, but also to move in and harness as much of whatever they were developing, and what we became known as, a lot of they found out about the V1 and all that sort of stuff. They took the personnel, the rockets and the engines and that kind of stuff, but they must have found an awful lot more that they've never ever revealed to the public, and that's why they controlled Germany for a hell of a long time, because it gave them that control over it to go in there and find this sort of stuff, because they presumably had a lot of knowledge that these things were going on, and a whole lot more.
Oh yeah, the actual occupation, actually, I can't remember exactly how long it lasted, but I know it was many years after the war that the Allies actually occupied the country. And it was a terrible time for the German people. I think more people were killed during that period than actually killed in the war. It was an awful time. They were absolutely brutal, the occupying Allies, and they were ruthless to the German population. And they obviously were very, very keen to get absolute total control of that country. And they set up their own governments in the what then became West Germany and East Germany after when finally it was all settled down. But they were very, very worried, I think, about any kind of nationalism or any kind of independence or patriotic spirit rising up in the people, for various reasons, not just because of this, but one of them may well be connected to the fact that Nazi society was heading towards a position where they might actually have a free energy economy and a free energy power system and things like that. Who knows what would have happened? I mean, just because the moral, the moral nature of the Nazi regime is not related to its ability to rise technologically. So who knows what might have happened if the Allies hadn't done this. And one of the reasons, I mean, it could well be what you were saying. They were just desperate. I mean, everything. They were prying into everything. I mean, they put people under complete, total control. And it also helped root out the scientists and things like that and get them out of the country.
Yeah. And the other thing is that I recall seeing on some, might have been the World at War TV series, which is a TV series that was produced in United Kingdom back in the 70s, using lots of archival footage filmed during the war, and it just covered the war years, the Second World War. And I think in the literally just after the war, many citizens of Germany were taken to concentration camps, literally outside their own village. They never knew existed, and were shown the pits where the bodies of the Jews were thrown and things like that. And they were, according to the film anyway, they were absolutely shocked to see that this thing was going on literally in their own backyard, and they couldn't believe it. And it was, I don't know what, it was just to show them what the Nazis were up to, basically. Which is an interesting thing, and that's presumably it was done as a kind of way of keeping the status quo in favour of the Allies, and they didn't obviously want these Germans being, like you say, too patriotic back to the Nazi Germany as it once was.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a strange thing. The only reason you want to do something like that would be to break down people's spirit, because obviously these are crime scenes, effectively, these places, these death camps. And there was a large investigation after the war. It ended with the Nuremberg trials and things like that, and all kinds of other similar operations. Now, the first thing a crime scene has to be done is it has to be secured. It has to be the evidence has to be preserved. I think it was an attempt. It really was an attempt to shock people emotionally into compliance. I mean, if someone showed me something similar in Britain, I mean, I'd feel horrified. I'd feel ashamed to be British and all these other things. And I may well capitulate in other ways. For example, if I was a scientist, if I had a secret, I was like Nikola Tesla or someone, I had some secret, I might think, well, maybe I don't really want to keep the secret anymore for my own country. I'm going to turn it over to these other people, because my own country's so evil. Therefore, I need to hand this secret over to these other people. That could be part of it.
Well, interestingly, we're kind of going back into that direction now. this country and indeed other countries in the world seem to be slipping into this kind of like Big Brother state, this kind of Stasi mentality where everything's being watched, all emails are being read, even though our politicians say, no, don't worry, we're not watching your emails, we're not looking at anything. Then it comes out in leaked reports that actually they have been for years. And it's this kind of like a fear mentality, going back to what you guys were saying about kind of controlling the people and suppressing the people under fear. We've got that going under the guise of hate speech. Now, this is very, very dangerous, this hate speech thing, because at first glance you think, it's a good thing because it's bad to hate, right? It's not a good idea to hate people. It's unethical. So let's suppress hate speech. The only problem with that is who dictates what is hate speech, who's behind what is considered hate speech. And the Soviet Union way of controlling people was basically to declare anybody who said anything bad against the state or Stalin or the authorities as people who are considered hate speakers or hate speakers, and off they went off to the gulags. And we haven't got the gulags as yet, but we've certainly got the hate speech laws set up. And it goes back to the kind of thing, did the Nazis really lose? Physically, geographically, they lost Germany and they lost the Third Reich, but a lot of them survived. And as you say, with Operation Paperclip, off they hopped to Argentina and America, set up various companies there. I won't mention them, but you can probably Google them yourselves and set up various pharmaceutical companies, big agri companies. I can say that I believe the same company that organised these classification of Jews and immigrants and things in the concentration camps, ordering them in chronological order, was actually IBM. So that's mainstream. It was their kind of computing system, although the computers didn't actually exist then, but it was kind of a similar system. There was another kind of chemicals company that's it. There's one of the Nazis ended up as a high position in a food company that also does things like fluoride and pesticides and nasty chemicals as well. So we could also go into things like fluoride used in the concentration camps and things like fluoride being promoted today. Come on, kids, keep your teeth healthy. And I've even seen like water bottles aimed at kids added fluoride. Which of
it's
course
awful, isn't it? Yeah,
it is. It's and you got to wonder, are they doing another Nazi Reich? But instead of the concentration camp, they're viewing the entire world as one giant concentration camp. What do you reckon about that?
That's definitely what's happening, and I mean, the concentration camps are coming. In fact, some of them are standing empty at the moment in some parts of the world, in like the FEMA camps in the United States.
Oh yes. I mean, this is Orwellian speak, because you know what they call them, Ben? They call them, wait for it, family threat fusion centres. Doesn't that sound wonderful? Why don't you just get a wonderful big hug from somebody and a lovely warm blanket as you go in a family threat fusion centre?
Oh God! They are literally, these things are standing there. They're literally waiting for the next hurricane to come, and people will be moved into them. And in fact, false flag terror attacks also will have the same effect. But yeah, there's no doubt the trend in global politics is towards greater authoritarianism and internationalism. And you mentioned the companies. I mean, I'm not going to mention any names, but it does seem that pharmaceutical companies tend to have German-sounding names. I've noticed. You just look at a list of them, and I'm sure you'll agree. And that's got a lot to do, I think, with Project Paperclip and things like that. And we are living in this world, and the secrecy to do with Big Brother is true. And George Orwell tried to warn us about this. He tried to warn us, especially about the psychological warfare that was being played on us. Yeah. And I mean, he correctly predicted that the battlefield of the late 20th century and the 21st century would be the human mind. That's where it comes down to. And
do you think, Ben, that Donald Trump has actually screwed this up because I don't think he's part of the dark forces. No. I mean, a lot of people kind of don't like him, and there is a buffoon element to him. But I actually kind of think he's on the right track of wanting to actually make America great again, dare I say.
I get all the time people write to me and they say, Ben, can't you see it? Trump's just another part of the conspiracy. This is why I'm so much more clever than you are, Ben, because I can see it and you can't. But the truth of the matter is, I've looked into this. I've looked at both sides. Trump is not a part of the conspiracy. Trump is an aberration. He was never meant to be in power. They desperately wanted Hillary Clinton to get in. They tried everything they could to get her in. They manipulate as much as possible to manipulate the electoral system within the actual country we're talking about here, the United States of America, and they failed. So, so I think that's it's good news that I think that they seem to be, for a while, they seem to be, or maybe they are continuing to lose their grip on the powers that be, the deep state, the Illuminati, are losing their grip on the political structures that they had controlled for so long. I mean, indeed, I think Brexit is something very similar. Yeah. So I think these things are good news, and I've been following old QAnon, the alleged insider from the Department of Energy, and a lot of what he or she or they say is absolutely fascinating and hopeful. So I'm glad this has happened. Whether the Empire will strike back, or whether it be Return of the Jedi, I don't know. But for the moment, certainly they're in the power structures for the first time, certainly within living memory, appear to have lost their grip. So,
have you heard that Hillary's actually going to run for 2020?
Oh, she will. I mean, they'll either if she can't do it, they'll clone her and get someone, and cure all the illnesses.
I've just got this kind of like vision of this kind of zombie corpse, kind of like on this kind of like wooden kind of pole with her arms kind of like cable tied into position, and there's just kind of like an animatronics thing where she's died kind of a couple of years before, and she's just kind of like being animated from I don't know, some creepy old kind of like
just like in spitting image.
Yeah, image. And she'd have like a little voice box implanted, a little speaker implanted in her throat, and it's just like, you citizens need to obey, vote for me, I am on your side.
It'll be something like that. It really will be something like that.
Well, yeah, you've got to do something with the old voice box that Stephen Hawking had, haven't you?
She pass it on to Hillary. It's very rare that they let people run again. Nixon, I think, is the only other person they let run for president again after he failed the first time, because he went up against Kennedy in 1961 and couldn't get in. But then he ran again against Johnson. And won, of course, in was it 67 or 68? I know that then Richard M. Nixon was in power. So it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, Hillary Clinton is very, very senior within the hierarchy of the United States, and along with her husband Bill, that crooked man she's married to. And you know this because of the Clinton body count. I mean, the number of people who seem to die if they cross the Clintons. I mean, there's most famously John Kennedy Jr., the son of the man who they had shot in 1963. You were talking about earlier. He had a plane crash, apparently. The engine just stopped in midair, something like that.
Unfortunately, these people lead unlucky lives, don't they? You know, all sorts of
yeah.
They can buy the best plane, but it all goes wrong.
Yeah, I know. Coincidentally unlucky. It's almost like it's planned, weirdly.
Now, just getting back to the Nazis again, obviously, because that's what we're talking about, I suppose, as well as Kit Kat. I heard rumours that the Nazis were in communications with Nordics or something like that. Did you know anything about that, Ben?
Yeah, they had psychics. They had psychic medium type people involved with them. This is another thing they took very seriously, which they did it more openly than the other side did. Indeed, the fact of the matter is they both sides actually worked with psychics and mediums, and in the Cold War even more so.
Madame Blavatsky, wasn't it?
She was involved with the espionage. Yes, so was Aleister Crowley. But the big name here was Sylvia Ortiz. She was a member of the Vril Society and various other organizations like that, and she was a psychic medium, and she did channel entities that were used to guide the Nazis. Indeed, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that Adolf Hitler was actually possessed. Hitler, when he went on stage, you could see from the way he talks, he's an excellent orator. Even if you can't speak German, you can see by the manic way he goes into some kind of altered state of consciousness when he's talking to a huge crowd, and these people would like stand around in in their massive numbers at various rallies, and there'd be torches and these little tiki torches and the big Olympic-style opening ceremony scale of the rituals that they went through. And Hitler, in his private moments, though, he used to have nightmares, and his Otto Rauschning, who was his private secretary, often spoke about this after Hitler's death or disappearance, not death. Well, that's a big subject. But he said Hitler told him, he says, I have seen the dark man, he called him. He's cruel and intrepid. He frightened me. And Hitler said several other things to Rauschning about how he believed that he was having visions of various demonic entities continuously.
I didn't realise that.
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting story, which of course would have led to his famous mental problems, which actually resulted. There was an attempt to assassinate him. Actually, someone put a bomb in his briefcase. It didn't go right. Hitler survived. He did have mental problems, and it's probably related to this.
What's his name? There's a film about it. There's a Tom Cruise film about it. It was and he only didn't get killed because what was that?
Valkyrie, was it called?
That's it. Yeah, I've not seen it. I've heard of it.
Yeah. I think the Operation Valkyrie was the plot to assassinate Hitler, but von Ribbentrop, was it? Oh,
it was von Stauffenberg.
Stauffenberg, that's it, Stauffenberg. And the only reason why Hitler didn't get killed was Stauffenberg was interrupted. He'd managed to kind of like, the way they were going to blow him up, there's kind of like a metal tube, and you break the glass, and the acid drops down into another compartment where the kind of explosive there's a wire that ignites the explosives, and he managed to kind of crimp one of them to get one of the bombs active. He was interrupted before he could do the second one, so he only had one bomb to rely on. He then kind of like went into the room with his like little briefcase, laid the bomb with the briefcase down by the large oak table, hid it behind the kind of like leg. But then I think one of the Nazis changed position, or Hitler might have changed position, and so he was just out of range of being killed. And because the second one didn't go off, or it wasn't crimped properly, the explosion wasn't enough that Hitler was going to get killed. So it's almost like some kind of dark demonic force was protecting Hitler. And I think I'm right in saying there were about 40 attempts on his life that all they were all unsuccessful.
Yeah,
it's crazy. And I really do think this kind of dark demonic force was protecting him. And you got to wonder, was his whole Aryan kind of like philosophy and his worshipping of the Aryans, was that a Nordic related in terms of kind of like these Nordic aliens, blonde, tall, blue eyes?
Yeah, it's funny because the perfect German Superman, according to the racial hierarchy philosophy of the Nazis, does look rather like those strange creatures that sometimes appear on flying saucers. To the point when you wonder, how can these be biologically from a separate planet? Because they wouldn't look so human. I mean, the Greys I could well imagine being from another planet, but not the Nordics. They look just too human. I mean, Hitler, I do believe he was... There was some black magic working through the Nazis. They were channeling it openly and trying to use it. But of course, you can't. If you try to use black magic, the black magic ends up using you. Yeah, that's the thing. That is what a lot of people who dabble in the occult find out. Hitler, I believe, I think his protection went on longer than that because I don't believe he died in that bunker in 1945. There's no evidence to suggest he did. It was very similar to the death of Bin Laden, actually, many years later. There was a body which no one was allowed to examine. There was just a couple of photos of it, some newsreel footage, and that was it. Looked a little bit like it, but then, of course, it's a long story, but I'm happy to talk about that if you like.
Well, I think we can, actually. We'll talk about that. We're just coming up to a break now, so we'll resume in part 2. But for the moment, thank you very much to Ben, Emlyn Jones, for joining us. We're talking Nazi UFOs and the Nazi practice of the occult. And this is the Paranormal Peep Show, and we'll be back after these messages.
Now pay attention, 005, Michael Caine. I understand you've been in trouble with those pesky Russians again. What have you been trying to sell them this time?
Look, I've got a box from eBay, and it looked to me, as I supposed to know as a bloody nerve agent, it said on the side, raspberry vape.
Raspberry vape? Oh no, this can only be one thing. We'll have to create a distraction. Time for the Paranormal Peep Show.
Hi, welcome back to the Paranormal Peep Show, where we're talking Nazi flying saucer technology with Andrew Chaplin and Ben Emlyn Jones. Welcome back to part 2, gentlemen. So, Ben, you've got some information regarding maybe this saucer technology that the Nazis developed. What happened to it? Where did it go to?
Well, I mean, I think it appears that it was, along with everything else, it was treated as the spoils of war. It was taken from Nazi Germany, former Nazi Germany, and taken back to the homelands of the victorious Allies to be developed and continued and back engineered on the various secret scientific projects that those countries were running. Obviously, this secrecy, I believe, still remains to this day. There are some intriguing clues about various leaks, including I believe what might be a crash of one of these objects, which happened in 1965. This was at the Kecksburg, place called Kecksburg in Pennsylvania, where something came down in the woods, and the government covered it up very, very strictly. But it's a really interesting story because it was massive. The Nazis made massive leap forwards in technology. Huge leap forwards, and they worked with very, very interesting scientists such as Victor Schauberger. Now, we mentioned Werner von Braun, we mentioned Kammler, SS General Kammler. Schauberger was different. Schauberger was actually an Austrian forester who began his work long before the war, when he developed several water engines involving what he believed was particular properties of water, whereby water itself contains free energy, and this free energy can be released if you actually treat the water in a certain way. For instance, you channel water down a particularly shaped pipe, and you keep the water at a particular temperature. It seems to add energy to the water rather than what you'd expect, which would be the water would reduce its energy and reduce its speed because of friction and because of inertia. Schauberger discovered that the opposite happened. There was almost like an implosion effect. The water actually increased speed and increased energy as it went down this particular pipe. Now, when the Nazis annexed Austria, he was forced to work for them. He was taken to a factory where he actually in Vienna, where he made various craft, which is a quest to develop the water engine into an air engine, which could use air in the same way. And it's possible that some of these craft, I believe, were actually powered by engines based on the Schauberger model, which is called a Trout turbine.
So, did this later become a more conventional type of aircraft that we see today? I mean, you sort of talk about turbine. It almost sounds like a development of a basic helicopter, which was obviously developed by, was it Sikorsky who developed the helicopter? I mean, he was one of the developers of the main helicopters, but I know it was developed just towards the end of the World War II, the helicopter, wasn't it?
Well, there were several strange projects that emerged soon after World War II. One of those was in Canada, and this is it's called the Roe saucer. It became known as the Avro car, and it was a disc-shaped aircraft which appears to levitate. Now, it turns out that there was when this was published, they said that the craft actually used a jet engine to lift itself. It actually used a jet engine pointing downwards to achieve lift. However, I do wonder if something more was going on there, because Timothy Good wrote in his book that he said that was just a cover for a far more secretive operation that was going on, which was involving some craft powered by Schauberger engines, which is very, very interesting if that's the case. Now, funnily enough, there was a large number of UFO sightings in World War II. Air crews from the RAF used to come back to base talking about how they'd seen what they called Foo Fighters, which are all kinds of strange things. There were lights in the sky, there were strange-looking craft, there were spherical objects that followed the aircraft, that actually followed the craft as they were flying along. And no one knew exactly what they were, but the government were very, very concerned about it. Indeed, in 1942, Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister, created a special operations committee, chaired by himself, to deal with this problem. And he was very, very concerned about it. It was highly secretive. So this has only just recently been declassified, actually, that Churchill was involved in this. But he was very, very interested in extraterrestrial life generally. And so he did wonder if these were extraterrestrial objects that were going on. I mean, the RAF crew thought that it was some kind of German secret weapon, and they may not have been well wrong. The thing is that the Germans were seeing the same thing. The German air crew was seeing the same thing, and they thought it might be an Allied secret weapon.
I was going to say, actually, like with the official reports, was there any mention that they were trying to find out if it was the Germans or even the Soviets that were developing this, or did they automatically jump to the conclusion that it must be extraterrestrial? Like, how deeply did they dig into the possibility it could be the other side?
I'm not sure exactly what the findings were of this particular operations committee. I know it was highly classified. In fact, Churchill recommended that it be classified for 50 years. So he was very, very concerned about this. He actually said that he was concerned about public panic, which is interesting considering that the British public had actually proved themselves to be remarkably resilient. They'd faced rationing, they'd faced a blitz, they'd faced losing loved ones in the war without panicking. So this obviously scared. I think the person who was panicking here was Winston Churchill.
So this is obviously pre Roswell and pre kind of flying saucers. What Ben is the kind of like the earliest depiction of what might be called little grey men or little green men or kind of actual flying saucers? I think the term flying saucers was that late 50s, mid 50s?
No, it was 1947.
Oh,
it was actually it can be traced very, very precisely to an interview given by someone called Kenneth Arnold. It was actually on the 2nd of July 1947. He talked about saucer skipping on a pond, and he thought that's what the craft he saw from his aircraft looked like. And the name stuck, and the term flying saucer then was used. Of course, a week later, Roswell happened, so it's very interesting there. But
was the Roswell case connected to the Kenneth Arnold case? I mean, do you think it was? It's a bit of a strange thing that they both happened within a week or two of each other.
I don't know. There was a large flap going on at that time because people were seeing these things everywhere. But to answer your earlier question, this was really when the popular image of the UFO appeared in our culture. But the actual UFO phenomenon seems to be universal and goes back much further. In fact, it dates back really throughout history. It goes back as far as we can trace. The earliest depictions of flying saucers and creatures that look like what we call aliens, well, they can be found in very ancient art, including art done by cave artists in prehistoric times. Which is very interesting indeed. So, including grey-like aliens and the Australian Aborigines, they painted pictures on the walls of caves of what they called wanginas. Now, these wanginas look very like greys.
It's also interesting that I think in the Betty and Barney Hill case, which is about 1961, they were coming down from, I think, crossing over the border from Canada, which we've mentioned.
New Hampshire, they were in.
Yeah, New Hampshire, into the northern United States to their home. And this is where they had their missing time. They were one of the first kind of recorded abductees. No one ever either publicly admitted it, at least. But I remember Barney, the husband, described, I think it was under hypnosis, the people that were abducting them, they appear to have Nazi-like uniforms, which I thought was an interesting connection.
Yes, that's right. He described them because, I mean, it may have been something that he made a cultural connection because of course, this was in the post-war sort of era. And a lot of people were war veterans. I don't know if Barney actually served in the war. I know he was a military veteran. I don't know if he actually fought in the war, but this could have been used for any kind of exotic appearing clothes, but when he actually described them, they do look a bit like that. I mean, from the images that he actually reproduced, they do actually look a bit Nazi. I don't know if there's necessarily a connection there. I don't believe that Betty and Barney Hill were taken by some Nazis. I think they were, from what it seems to me, their report seems classically extraterrestrial, actually, in nature. They were the first publicly announced case of alien abduction, but they were not the first alien abductees by far. It appears that aliens have been taking us for as long as we've been human. The reports of these things go back to prehistoric times, but it sort of like opened the floodgates, I think, to a lot of other people who've been having these experiences, and they came forward. So there's a lot of other witnesses came forward after the Hills did. So I think the Hills did a great service in that respect.
Yeah, and also the fact is that the world was changing after the war. We were obviously aware that there was wars going on because they had newsreel footage and newspapers and things like that going on. and the world was connecting a lot more than has ever been done in history. For the first time, we were documenting the First World War on old newsreels, and then we were actually documenting the Second World War with sound this time. So we were getting a much more in-your-face experience of what war was like, and people could kind of hear further accounts than they could ever do in history before. And so for people like Betty and Barney Hill, their accounts of their abductions was perhaps just came at the right time when the media machine could talk about this sort of thing. And it was obviously written down in the book by John G. Fuller, The Interrupted Journey. But there's obviously been more recent accounts now, because obviously these books have proved very popular. So, in the 20th century, it's like the whole world exploded with information, and it's obviously exploded a second time around with the age of the internet. We're connecting like anything now, and so we're getting so much more information than we've ever been exposed to ever. And we're hearing so much more.
It's really quite it's impressive actually that we now have the media has improved so much since World War II in various different stages, and this I think has allowed people to have a voice when they otherwise wouldn't have had one. So that's a really, really good thing. I wonder if television hadn't been around, whether the journalists would have bothered to cover the Hills case, or indeed many of the subsequent cases that came up after that. I doubt it, to be honest. But it's I know lots and lots of people who have had these experiences, who have had these various experiences, and I've looked into my own life and wondering what has happened to me, which I can't remember for various reasons. And I don't know what these things are, why they come for people, why they take them. But it's happening. There's no doubt. There's the psychologists who've analysed this since the Hills, because the Hills saw an analyst who said that they were suffering from some kind of delusion. It was some kind of folie à deux kind of hysteria thing. But others, such as Bud Hopkins and John Mack, have come forward since then, and they've analysed this honestly using the evidence that comes before them, and they said, no, it's real. There is an objective reality behind these experiences, and we can't deny that. So,
And the Nazis were supposedly, after the war, lots of them were escaping, those that got away, and the reports are that they ended up in South America. Now, there's reports now going around that there's something happening in Antarctica.
Yes.
To do with, and lots of people go, oh my God, there's a secret Nazi base down there. And
Neil, isn't it on record that the Nazis did actually, because they called it something like New Schwaberland,
yes,
or New
Schwaben,
and they were, I think I'm right in saying, is they were taking seeds down there. Or was that a more of a modern thing, like seeds to kind of store things in case there was like an apocalypse or something?
Well, it was the 1938 German Antarctic expedition, which is historically documented. It was publicly announced that they were going to set up a headquarters there, or set up a facility in Antarctica, a New Swabia, like you said. It's a German Antarctic territory. Now, there's a public face to that, but I reckon there was an awful lot going on behind the scenes that I think was a little bit more suspicious, and it may have been a far more ambitious project than they were actually announcing properly. And indeed, I met a man actually in 2006 who told me that he had been a soldier that was sent to Antarctica in 1947, 2 years after the war ended, to actually root out a bunch of Nazis hiding in a base which was built underneath the ice. There's a lot of other people who've had these kind of reports. Now, there's a good reason for believing this, because the year earlier, in 1946, there was an operation called Operation High Jump. Now, this was a U.S. naval task force was sent to Antarctica. Now, the reason they were sent there was to prospect for minerals, set up scientific research centers, and to generally explore the location. Now, you could do all those things without 2 aircraft carriers, 3 battleships, 4 submarines, 18,000 sailors and marines. That was a wartime expedition. It was a military attack. It was a military operation. So, Operation High Jump. There's Admiral Byrd. You see, several people, including Admiral Byrd, who was one of the commanders, spoke out about this. Now, he ended up in psychiatric care. And you may think, oh, that's bad luck. But then another guy called Rear Admiral James Forrestal also started well, I think he was going to say something, and he ended up in a psychiatric ward too. And indeed, he allegedly committed suicide by throwing himself out of a 14-floor window. Now, anyone who's actually knows how hospitals work would know that one thing you don't do if you have a psychiatric ward on the 14th floor is have windows that aren't very, very securely locked and reinforced, because the patients will be jumping out like flies. It'd be like a lemmings coming out of there.
Yeah, yeah. So they were connected with these original Antarctic expeditions. Now, interestingly, my brother went to Antarctica about a year ago now, and to actually get there, he had to fly to South America first of all. I think it was possibly Brazil. I can't remember which country he landed in, and literally make his way by various sub-flights down to the very southern tip, and then take a boat off the southern coast of South America. And I can't remember how many hours. It might have been a good 12 hours plus to get down to Antarctica. Now, just to give people a scale of what this is like, people say, "Oh, did he see an alien base there?" Well, the thing is, as soon as you land at Antarctica, it's larger than the United States and Canada put together. So it's a huge, huge place. So yes, you can get to Antarctica. It's not banned. There are certain areas that might be out of bounds as such, but as a free agent, you can travel there, providing you've got the money. And I think it cost my brother something like £11,000 to £12,000 to get there. But he said he gave it 11 out of 10 as far as holidays were concerned. He saw whales and ice flows and icebergs and things like that. So, he sent me a few videos. It looked really good. But, there's supposedly a banned area, a no-fly zone, supposedly where they're trying to keep the air pure is the official excuse. But I've seen some videos on YouTube where people have accidentally overflown the no-fly zone, where they're literally carrying goods between one station and another, and to cut down flight time and fuel and stuff like that, they go the no-fly zone, and they're given a real big dressing down about it. But they've seen a few weird things over this no-fly zone, which suggests there's a lot more going on there than is actually publicly spoken about. I mean,
well, Neil, we're going into flat Earth territory now.
Well,
we had to go, didn't we?
Bottom of the Earth territory, I think. But Buzz Aldrin supposedly went there. Buzz Aldrin, supposedly the second man on the moon, went down there. And you think, well, why is he going down there? And also, Jim Lovell, the other guy of Apollo 13, has been down there doing tours. And you're thinking, why are these astronauts going down to Antarctica of all places? It's a very strange thing. It's conjuring up lots of rumours, basically.
Maybe they're trying to strip away truth's protective layers, as Neil Armstrong said in one press interview.
Well, something to melt the ice, at least.
It's extremely odd, isn't it? I mean, there was a large number of famous people went there, actually. Patriarch Kirill actually went to visit the Bellinghausen, which is a Russian base on Antarctica. He's head of the Russian Orthodox Church. Now, Antarctica, as you just said, is an enormous continent, and it's almost entirely covered with ice. It's uninhabited. There's no permanent population there. There are a few thousand scientists and maybe a few more secret ones. I don't know. But there's no soil or anything like that. You can't actually grow anything. So the question then has to arise is why are there so many? Why is there such a huge military contingent down there? There's a huge military garrison. All nations who operate there at various places. Now, travel restriction is enforced. There are no major roads there. And it's what you'd expect. I mean, obviously, the harsh climate is going to restrict people's access to traveling alone anyway. But there are also, huge areas that are sealed off. And they're sealed off, and there's, basically, you're not allowed to go in there. These are, secret compounds where you're not allowed to enter. And according to the guy I met, he said that in the German area, in Yugoslavia, they've got the remains of the bases there. They've got the remains of there, and there's tanks. There's tanks that were used in battle. And there was a huge war there. And God knows what they're using it for now, because out of sight, out of mind, Antarctica is one of the few areas of land surface on Earth that is not sovereign territory. It's a no man's land. So you can basically go down there. If you have the resource, you have the money, you have the technology, and you have the infrastructure to keep the people alive in the harsh climate, you can go there and you do whatever the hell you like. There's the Antarctic Treaty, which was signed in 1958, which is administered by the United Nations. But, if you want to break the Antarctic Treaty, who's ever going to prove you wrong? I mean, how are they ever going to go? Are they going to actually? Do they send inspectors down every so often? Of course not. You're thousands of miles from anywhere. You can do what the hell you like. And there's an article in Nexus magazine talking about nuclear testing in Antarctica, and it wouldn't surprise me at all. It really wouldn't.
Well, for the Nazis to escape to Antarctica and set up a secret base, it begs the question that, I mean, if they're falling on resources because of the war, they're not likely to have the capital to set up an infrastructure, on the bottom of the planet, basically.
They would do. They would if they adapted the power plants and propulsion systems of these various aircraft into some way of generating energy. They could easily. They could have all the energy they wanted. They could heat up certain areas to grow food. They could keep themselves warm. They could generate light in the darkness when it's the middle of their winter down there. I think they would. In fact, the only way you could ever survive in Antarctica without a massive supply chain leading to the rest of the world would be if you had some kind of free energy system, which is quite likely. I mean, the guy I met didn't know this. He didn't know whether or not this was true, but I did say, look, did they have a power plant or anything like that at the base which you didn't recognise? And he said, I never got to see anything like that.
Yeah, but I mean, was he sworn to secrecy or anything like that? He couldn't tell anything, or he was quite happy to tell you what he knew?
Well, he said he was sworn to secrecy. The whole team. He said he reckons that over 1,000 men died in that campaign. British soldiers died in that campaign, and it's never been formally recognised. Now he was demobilised shortly after that, but he was training. He was sent to South Africa. He was sent to the Falkland Islands, I think he said, and he was training there. And then he was sent to Antarctica, and he came back. He actually he met me in a pub. He's just a guy who got in touch with me online, and he met me in a pub back in 2006.
Just quickly, Ben, did you check his credentials?
No, I mean, unfortunately not. I only knew him by the name Jack, and I met up with him, and I just spoke to him. He didn't bring any paperwork or anything like that. He wouldn't even let me take notes. He just told me this story, and then he went home. I met him twice.
And what was your impression of him on the second time? I mean, you've met him the first time, you had to go home, digest what he had told you. And the second time, you're kind of a little bit more prepared and maybe clued up of how to approach it. I mean, after the second time, did you kind of think, this guy seems to know what he's talking about, or is a bit fishy, or what?
He sounded like he knew what he was talking. I mean, I just got an intuitive impression that he was telling me the truth. He just sounded sincere. He was a strange chap, actually. He sort of wandered off topic every now and again. He wanted to play dominoes at one point. But he was an old guy. He looked about the right age to have been a young adult in the late 1940s. I heard through the contact, the guy who'd introduced us, that he actually died a couple of years ago. I did a little memorial video to him. But I don't know his real name. I mean, if I was ever interrogated about this matter, I wouldn't be able to tell people much more than what I've actually published about him.
And so when he said a lot of people, British servicemen, died in this battle, who was the battle with?
The Nazis that were at New Swabia.
After the Second World War, another battle. After the war was ceasefire, this was another fresh battle. Yes,
over 2 years after World War II officially ended, there was a battle in Antarctica with British forces and German. Now, I believe there was probably a similar battle the year before, in 1946, with Operation High Jump. It appeared that the war was carrying on down in Antarctica, and they just didn't want to tell anyone about it. Or maybe Hitler was there. I don't know. Maybe Hitler was there. Who knows?
Well, there's that film, isn't there? Nazis. There's Nazis on the moon, isn't there?
Iron Skies. Yeah, it's quite funny.
Iron Sky. Yeah. I'd love to see. I've never seen it. And then there's something about was there a recent one where it's a kind of Sarah Palin type of? Is it Sarah Palin? Who's the one that was she was a vice president or potentially vice president?
Sarah Palin. She ran alongside John McCain. I remember.
Yeah, and in this Nazi film, supposedly Nazi film, there's a presidential lady who she rides. I can't remember what it is. She walks all the way to it's like the end of the world. She walks all the way to Antarctica somehow in high heel shoes. She looks a bit like Sarah Palin, and she meets Hitler, who's riding a Tyrannosaurus Rex. In Antarctica.
Hillary Clinton, is it?
I've not seen this, but it sounds hilarious.
I saw trailers for it about 3 years ago, and I thought, oh my god! But I heard it's from the same people who did Iron Sky or whatever. So nice. if you type in Iron Sky, you might find the title of this film, and it's literally supposedly a subterranean Nazi base in Antarctica. Sarah Palin's there, or this lookalike of Sarah Palin, still in high heels, I gather, being the president at the time, who meets Hitler riding a T-Rex. It's crazy.
I'll check
it's
it out.
worth a watch.
I'll check that out because maybe the real Sarah Palin sometimes nips down there, and you never know. I mean, the thing about it is, if you have access to this technology, you're far more mobile than you are in other places. Because, for example, in the Iron Skies, the original Iron Skies, the premise is that the Nazis after the war went to the moon, and that with the craft, with the performance that the Haunebu and its successors are said to have, that is perfectly feasible. It's perfectly feasible they actually did that. And indeed, there are actually reports from several people, as someone called Carl Wolf and someone else called Donna Hare, who have gone on record stating that they worked for NASA, that they basically saw photographs taken from the dark side of the moon. It's not dark, they just call it that. It's the side facing away from the Earth, which we can't see from the ground. Well, there are actually cities, there are buildings, there are artificial structures there. So if you wanted to build a base in space where no one could see from the ground, where there's not many places in the universe that are actually invisible from the Earth for astronomers with their telescopes, except the far side of the moon. So it's the logical place that they would go. And both these people, Sergeant Carl Wolf, Donna Hare, both swear they've sworn on the Bible. They'll say they've signed an affidavit saying that what they said was true. So could these be, well, they may be extraterrestrial bases, they may be secret government bases, or maybe they're the remains of Nazi bases. Who knows?
Yeah, I remember seeing that. It's quite a well-known video for people into aliens and UFOs. And in fact, I used the Carl Wolf presentation in my own Aliens on the Moon talk, which I did at your Dreaming Sources conference.
Yes, that's right. Yes, that's very interesting. The video's up if anyone wants to see that.
Yeah. So it begs the question then: do you think that the secret space program, as Richard Dolan calls it, the breakaway civilization, where supposedly, we're shown all these conventional rocketry like the space shuttle, the Apollo moon program, the Soyuz stuff and things like that. All this rocket technology is supposedly where we're at in the 21st century now. But according to Richard Dolan, the secret space program, there's hidden technology that we have no knowledge of, or the general populace has no knowledge of. Do you think that is perhaps where the Nazis, their technology may be coupled with the alien technology of Roswell or whoever, has been literally pulled together and pushed out into this new area to become what is called the secret space program?
Yes. I mean, there's this continuity leading from the Nazi regime through the United States and other former allies in the World War II, right up to the present day, which involves these secret projects, secret science, technology that is not published anywhere. It's not accessible to the public. It's not been declassified. It's not been released for the benefit of humans on Earth, which will be enormous. Which, of course, it will be of enormous benefit to us. I mean, just imagine having an energy supply which didn't need any fuel and caused no pollution or toxic waste or any danger at all. I mean, you have to sit and think for a couple of hours about how different the world would be if that was the case. So in a sense, there's this almost unbroken line where what's Nazi and what's not Nazi almost blurs with what's American and what's British and what's Soviet and what's modern Russian and things like that. To me, it's an indicator of a super government that controls the entire world, which I've long believed exists, and the evidence for it is overwhelming. And it has technology. It has its technology. It uses it. As I explained earlier, it's turned some of it into weapons to destroy two of the biggest buildings in the world. So it's a pretty tricky situation if you're outside the clubhouse, really, as most of the people in the world are.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the best places to develop it secretly, I'd presume, would be places like Antarctica. Because obviously, if in the post-war years you set up something down there anyway, whether it's a Nazi base or American base or whatever, you might as well just build upon that foundation and carry it on. And the fact is that it's a very difficult place to get to and inaccessible for most people. It'd be a perfect place to develop this sort of stuff, and hence why we're maybe hearing rumours of things going on there. all the time. You know, we're hearing, oh, there's a secret alien base, but maybe it's not a secret alien base. Maybe it's just a kind of Area 51 type of thing down there, out the way. We don't know anything about it because it's so far off our, normal everyday lives that we're kind of like spoon-fed Area 51 stuff all the time, and we're focusing on that when really it's actually maybe down in Antarctica.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't have to worry about the UFO enthusiasts like me, driving down Groom Lake Road with our cameras and our telephoto lenses and our telescopes and our drones and our our radio scanners and things like that. Area 51 is now. I mean, if there was a secret project at Area 51, if I was behind it, I'd probably move it somewhere else by now. Because when you see that, I mean, you could go to Las Vegas and you could hire. There's an Area 51 tour. You can actually get on a bus in the Tourist Information Office.
Is too close to popular places like Las Vegas and things.
Yeah,
it's just too close. So to me, Area 51 is probably a cover story. Maybe the whole Bob Lazar thing's a cover story, just literally to focus you on that area, thinking about it the whole time, when in fact it's miles away. And also the other interesting thing, if you think about it's always been argued that the Apollo astronauts couldn't get to the moon because of the radiation belts, the Van Allen radiation belts around the Earth. Initially, they thought there was 2 of them in a kind of donut fashion, but they've actually found that on occasions there's actually 3 radiation belts extending from anywhere from sort of 500 to 600 miles above the Earth's surface right out to about 1,000 miles. In fact, they did try and blow a hole in the radiation belt back in the late 50s, which I think actually created the 3rd radiation belt. But
that's right, Operation Starfish Prime. They actually detonated nuclear bombs in the Earth's upper atmosphere. They're insane.
They increased the problem, So it shows that if they're trying to blast a hole in the radiation belt to get astronauts out, and the fact it didn't work, suggests to me they got to have some sort of fear of the radiation belts, yet somehow the Apollo astronauts supposedly got through it with no ill harm whatsoever, you see.
It's very, very strange. I mean, it's like a kind of like there's like contradictory things. They always do these things where they say one thing and then another, and it's completely the opposite. It's what George Orwell called black-white. Or doublethink.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, they say things like, well, UFOs are crazy. Only loonies see them. They are non-existent. They are a non-issue. And we're going to make fun of them in the media. But we're going to allocate we're going to allocate $8 million to a research project to look into them. And you see this repeated all over the world. I mean, almost every country on the Earth with any kind of significant military has some kind of UFO investigation program. So they say, telling you it doesn't exist, they say, we're going to dedicate an awful lot of effort to looking into this thing that doesn't exist. We're even going to employ Nick Pope and take him on his Ministry of Defense salary, and he could dedicate himself full-time to this. You see what I mean? It's ludicrous.
They withhold all these secret UFO files while saying that we're all cranks at the same time. Well, if we're all cranks, why don't they just release all these files? But what I was getting at with the radiation belts is that the only place that there doesn't appear to be radiation is in the North Pole and South Pole of the Earth. So feasibly, you could get craft take off from the South Pole or the North Pole. Now, the reason that rocket technology doesn't or can't take advantage of that is because it's too cold temperatures for them to actually work properly. I mean, we remember the Space Shuttle Challenger blowing up because the temperatures were too cold for those O-rings around the
that's right. They broke because of ice. They actually had ice.
That's right.
I think they froze. Yeah.
Yeah, and ice fell off chunks of the external tank and smashed into some of the tiles on the wing of one of the shuttles, which caused a problem on re-entry. Now, maybe secret source of technology, whatever it may be, can take off from Antarctica without any problem of having to navigate through radiation, because those radiation areas are clear on the South Pole. Hence, this is why there's a peak of activity of the solar flares, not the solar flares, the aurora borealis around the north, because it's where the friction of the solar flares are affecting the Earth near the north and south poles. That's why you get that strange effect of the lights in the northern hemispheres or the southern hemispheres. So
if you look at the diagrams, they do look like they're donut shaped, aren't they?
Exactly. So you fly the craft through the eye of the needle, so to speak, and maybe this is it, that they beat the radiation by flying out of the South Pole or the North Pole, but I suspect it's the South Pole, probably because there's a lot of people more can get to the North Pole a lot easier than the South Pole, I'd imagine, because you've got lots of northern European countries like Norway and places like that that actually own islands around the North Pole. So that's probably more of an issue. So I'd imagine the South Pole's the best one to go for, being a larger continent as well.
Yeah, and also there's no dry land in the Arctic Ocean. It's just sea with a sea ice. But it's closer to land. It's closer to land than like northern Norway, I think, is the closest point to the North Pole. But it's true. I mean, when obviously when the Van Allen belts were first discovered, people didn't know what shape they were. So all this stuff about the moon rockets got through them safely because they just flew around them and things like that, or they flew through them very quickly, so they didn't get affected. Well, I mean, I don't buy that for a second. It's easy to say that afterwards when all the astronauts have come back safely, but not beforehand. I don't think so. Yeah, but it's obvious that space is something of a mysterious place, and I can't help thinking. I mean, someone else actually suggested that. It was actually Mary Bennett, the Apollo researcher, but she said that Operation Starfish Prime was actually an attempt. It was a secret attempt by the government to force a passage through the Van Allen belts to allow manned rockets, to actually enter and leave the Earth's environment and Earth orbit. Obviously, it did worse than fail. It actually created a third ring, which is going to last another 600 years. So it actually made it, which is much more powerful. So it made this probably worse. But it wouldn't surprise me if they actually did try to do that, Neil. I mean, they're that crazy, these people.
Wow. Well, that's it. Actually, I think the original Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea movie, made in, I think, early 60s, which became the TV series Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, but the Seaview submarine. The premise of that movie was to do with trying to sort out the Van Allen radiation belts, because that was when initially discovered. So they featured them in that science fiction movie. I can't remember whether it was to do with the explosions or I think it was something to do with the fact that Van Allen radiation belts were set on fire in some way in that movie.
I remember there was a big red sky. The crew of the submarine surface at the North Pole, and there's this big red sky, and the ice is all melting, and they take their warm jackets off, and they're sweating. And I remember at the end they have to, sorry for the spoilers, but they have to launch a missile into the actual Van Allen belts and destroy, I forgot what they call it now. A
fire extinguisher.
Arc. It's kind of fire extinguisher to destroy this arc of energy that somehow appeared around the Earth and caused this overheating of the planet.
Environmental themes right back then.
Yeah, I mean, I hope the global warming believers don't get any ideas in their head about launching missiles.
Ben, what's your theory on the moon? I mean, do you think we actually went there, or do you think there's a secret space program that went there?
I think people have been at the moon. I mean, it's inconceivable that people would not use this technology to explore the moon. Our closest celestial neighbour, the Nazis probably may well have done it. They had the ability to do it. Maybe people even before then. They've probably gone further afield too. I mean, I imagine there's maybe well be bases on the planets, which NASA are covering up to this day. Who knows? As for the Apollo missions, I believe I question the Apollo missions. The Apollo missions said that people in rockets went to the moon through all this radiation and everything like that. Nothing ever went wrong. Well, apart from Apollo 13, there were no major malfunctions on any of the missions. And even with Apollo 13, they did manage to rescue the astronauts. They did get back to Earth safely, which is an extraordinary success rate for any space mission. No other space mission on Earth has ever come close to that success rate. Richard D. Hall has just done some statistics on that, and it's really quite astonishing about how successful the Apollo missions were. So I question I don't question the fact we've been to the moon. I question the premise that we have been there using the methods, personnel, and at the time history tells us it was done.
I would agree. I mean, if you look at the lunar lander, at the time, going back a few years, wasn't it fantastic we landed on the moon? Look at it now in hindsight with all the kind of like conspiracy theories about it. It really does look like a load of foil and some curtain rods gaffer taped together.
There was no guarantee it would even work. I mean, it would never been tested with an unmanned mission before. It had been tested on the Earth, been tested in orbit, but no one had ever landed it. It had never really been tested. And if it hadn't worked, and there'd been some kind of breakdown which couldn't be fixed on the spot, which would very easily happen in space, there'd be no hope of getting those astronauts back. They'd be dead. They would be dying on live TV. During the Cold War.
The number of times a rocket on Earth where they're doing a countdown. They've had to abort the mission and stall the countdown because of something's gone wrong, or pipes leaking, or the weather's a bit harsh, or something like that. They've had to abort many and delayed takeoff because of various factors. And yet, all of those missions took off from the moon, bang on time, etc. It makes you wonder. But the other thing that's been occurring to me is that if we do have a secret space mission that gets to the moon, was that mean that Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were privy to that information? I mean, were they secretly flown in these craft to the moon to reenact supposedly landing in the lunar module, or were they out in some Nevada desert filming a reenactment of the moon's surface there, and didn't have any knowledge of this secret space technology?
Either is possible. The general narrative is that this was done on Earth. It was done in some secure location on Earth, and there's some evidence to suggest that, actually, such as the effects of an atmosphere can be seen, for instance, on the lunar dust. And some people say the flag waves, and it does wave a couple of times, very slightly. But it could easily, with a secret space program, it could easily have been filmed in the very locations that they were faking the mission going.
Well, that's right, because with a secret UFO technology, you could fly 3 guys in orbit, or 2 guys you need for the moon, because you don't need a third one who's in the capsule going around the moon. You can fly 2 guys. They don't have to be Neil Armstrong or Buzz Aldrin. They could just be your astronauts from the secret space program, enacting their stuff, setting up the camera, walking around another Apollo module or something like that that's landed, or that they've put there, film the whole thing, and transmit it back to Earth, whilst Neil Armstrong and all the other astronauts are actually just going in orbit around the Earth for 3 or 4 days. Until splashdown time.
Yeah, I mean, the rocket would launch. People saw the rocket go up into the sky. People followed it into the sky with their telescopes and things like that. But I mean, once you get up into space, it's very easy to actually deceive people on the ground about what's going on. Very easy indeed.
There's never been a continuous shot all the way from Earth to the moon.
No, I mean, there are people who claimed, oh well, amateur radio hams were like monitoring the transmissions and things like that, but they didn't have the ability to actually discern what would be coming from the actual craft and what are maybe fake transmissions from an unmanned object. It's there's no way you can't prove that was actually the same rocket, the same craft with the same astronauts. Yeah,
I mean, it's been suggested that with the various technology that they can land on the moon, they can actually transmit, voice recordings from that technology back to Earth that could be picked up by radio hams. So all these radio hams saying, "Oh, I heard Neil Armstrong on the moon." It could just be relayed there, like a relay station on the moon. They don't have to physically be there.
Yeah, that's right. The actual transmission was tightly controlled because they have. It all came through several places. For instance, the Goldstone Radio Telescope, the Parkes Observatory in Australia. This was all then taken to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. All these transmissions, and it was from there that these images were disseminated to the media. There was no live feed to the TV studio like you might get nowadays with, like, say, the World Cup, a match there. The actual reporters were filming off a large TV screen that had been set up. This is why some of the images are such poor quality. You see some of the recordings.
Well, the other argument is that when they're transmitting from the moon, they set up a basic kind of dish antenna that points back, I think, to the supposed lunar module, points back towards Earth. I can't remember, not the lunar module, points back towards either the command module, which then relays the signal back to Earth, but I can't understand how that could be, maybe because it's moving around the moon anyway, but they're aiming the signal back to Earth. But it's been pointed out that back in those days, in the 60s, if you were doing a live broadcast anywhere on Earth from you'd have to have a great big truck full of equipment and large antennas and everything to send the signal just from one part of the United States to the other. And yet here these guys, with nothing bigger than a satellite dish that you'd have on your roof today, with a big cable going back to the lunar module and a small handheld camera on a tripod or something, and that was getting the whole broadcast supposedly going all the way back to Earth.
Well, it's funny that because you actually can see the antenna on the top of the lunar module in various pictures, and it is literally as big as a domestic TV antenna, and it's pointing towards the Earth. Now, the believers will say things like, "Well, they had huge receivers, so the antenna receivers on Earth were really, really big. Like obviously, Parkes and Goldstone are actually they're radio telescopes." But the thing about it is, there was no. I mean, you know this because you work in broadcasting. You know, there was no. They didn't have time to actually set this up and test it beforehand. So they were just very, very lucky. They were very lucky on all these missions. They seemed to be able to. They seemed to get a connection quite quickly, and it worked.
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken to people. I mean, anyone who's lost their satellite signal for, say, Sky TV have had immense problems trying to tap their dish back to line it up to a satellite, and it always has to be done by. I mean, these days you can get these things like satellite finders. The technology of today, that is, where it'll supposedly tell you where to aim your dish and things like that to line it up with certain satellites, either over Europe or United States or wherever you're trying to pick it up from. But even that is very, very difficult. So for these guys on the moon in their spacesuits who haven't got viewfinders to their video cameras or their Hasselblad cameras fixed to their chest because they can't actually look down into a viewfinder because the viewfinder's not there, for them to suddenly be able to line up a dish back to the Earth to beam a signal, etc., back to the Earth and get it, bang on each mission. And these aren't TV technicians, remember. They're pilots, It does seem to stretch credibility, really.
Have you also heard of the infamous kind of quiet talk video as well? Are you aware of this?
Oh, this is the one that's on the a funny thing that happened on the way to the moon with Bart Subra.
So basically what it is, there was kind of like a secret channel, audio channel to the astronauts, where kind of like NASA could communicate with the astronauts that wouldn't be picked up in kind of like the public domain or on a public live feed or anything like that. And there's supposed to be a delay, obviously, with transmission between kind of like the space module and Earth because they're so far away. And it seems to suggest, because there's a very quiet voice that says, because what it was, the astronauts are talking, and they're talking to base, they're talking to mission control, and then they kind of like pause. So that they've obviously been told to pause as if there's a delay. Then there's a very quiet voice that says, "Talk," and then they carry on talking.
That's right, and it's
They've
not
been prompted to talk, and it indicates that the delay is false. The delay is kind of like being prompted by somebody else.
And the voice is very clearly neither of the astronauts.
Yes, that's right. And
so where's it coming from?
And it's being whispered as if kind of like not to, doesn't want to be heard, doesn't want to be picked up in any other way. And I don't know how it got out. Maybe kind of like they accidentally flicked it onto a channel where it was broadcastable, or maybe it was released surreptitiously. I don't know. Things
do, get out. I know that David Percy and Mary Bennett claim that there were people on the inside who were deliberately putting mistakes in to try and get the word out. But they make mistakes as well. This happens in modern space missions, like with Samantha Cristoforetti, the astronaut who but obviously she reacted to the presence of a UFO when she hadn't been told not to. So she was out doing a spacewalk with a Russian colleague, and the Russian next to her, he says very clearly, "Shh, quiet, don't say anything." And she's going, "Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god," and he says, "Shh, quiet."
Ben, if people were going to search for that, what would be the keywords in YouTube?
Shush.
Astronaut, just put in astronaut sees UFO. Right. Or just put ISS, International Space Station. This is quite recent. I think this was back in around about 2014 this happened.
Yeah.
So now Cristoforetti's made no further comment, and she's obviously someone's had a word with her since. This is why I wrote to Tim Peake. I sent him an open letter when he got back to Earth, just asking him, look, if you saw it, did you see anything? If you did, were you told not to say anything?
Yeah, and he never replied, let me guess.
He never replied, no.
Oh,
so maybe he is. If you're going to be selected for the astronaut program, they're obviously very careful about who they send up there. And there's no way I'd ever be allowed, because even if I had the training and things like that,
going back to the delay.
No, I'd immediately spill the beans as soon as I could.
That's why you're not an astronaut, Ben.
I didn't know you're allowed to take beans up there.
So going back to the delay thing, Ben, have you heard or seen the video where there's a lovely little classroom of kids and they're talking to the astronauts on the ISS, and there's supposed to be a delay of something like 11 seconds, something like that. And so the TV presenter is asking questions to the astronauts on the ISS that the kids have asked in the classroom, and they kind of like wait 11 seconds, and then the ISS astronauts reply, and then blah blah blah. And what happens is that the kids or the presenter ask a question, there's a delay, the astronauts answer, then the presenter makes a joke, or one of the kids makes a joke, and the astronauts in the ISS laugh immediately or pull a face immediately.
I've not seen that. No, I mean, this would be very interesting.
So in other words, there's no actual delay. They forgot to delay themselves.
Yeah, because I mean, there's a lot of videos out there about how saying that the ISS is fake, or now I mean, a lot of the people who are saying this are flat earthers, and people I don't agree with. I don't think the Earth is flat.
Yeah.
And most of the videos, so I've stopped watching those kinds of videos, but maybe I should start watching them again, because it's always possibly that there is some fakery going on when regarding the ISS. It's got nothing to do with the Earth being flat, but it may be connected in some other way. For example, the flat earthers are, of course, all on my side when it comes to the moon landings. They just think the reason they fake the moon is because the Earth is flat and the moon doesn't exist.
I see this thing as a pick and mix, Ben. It's a pick and mix with all of these subjects, whether it's ghosts, UFOs, Nazis on the moon, aliens, whatever. You take what you kind of like feel is right for you, and kind of like put the rest either in the bin, or you put it on the on hold kind of setting. I mean, for instance, somebody like David Icke, I actually quite like David Icke. I think he speaks a lot of truth, but there's a lot of things that are controversial that I might not agree with, but that's okay. You know, that's life. You know, you don't have to agree with everything. It's like Trump. Generally speaking, I think Trump is a decent guy and trying to do the right things, but there's not everything that I agree with that he does.
Exactly. It's the same as with me. I mean, it's like, as far as this is concerned, maybe I will start watching some of these fake ISS, these videos, allegedly fake ISS videos. I'll see what they're like. I'll check those out, though, what you've been talking about. And
there's also glitches, Ben. There's visual glitches. So there's a way one of the ladies holds a microphone, and for a moment her fingers kind of go inside and outside of the microphone, which kind of seems to suggest kind of augmented live CGI.
I can probably explain that. I can probably explain that. There's what they call what they call scanning technology of cameras, basically, and there's what they call interlaced technology and progressive scanning. Progressive scanning is more recent sort of thing, and basically interlaced. It's hard to explain, but it's like it uses lines of the previous picture in interlaced, and sometimes you kind of get ghosting effects, or you kind of get bands going across people's heads, especially in movement and things like that. Now, sometimes you get these artifacts with broadcasting, especially, I'd imagine, on something that's moving, 600 miles an hour or whatever it is, circling the Earth every 90 minutes, because it's such a moving target. And also remember is that they're broadcasting from the International Space Station, and it's not necessarily in the TV format of say the United say Britain. We work in POW, which is line technology.
NTSC,
NTSC in America, and so they have to convert it, you see, through conversion things. And so sometimes you get these things called conversion artifacts, as it tries to convert different fields of TV fields into other ones with 625 lines to 525, etc., or whatever the lines may be. And so therefore you do get these errors creeping into conversions as well. So I would say what you're thinking, her hand's disappearing behind a microphone, can be a conversion artifact, because you can see it in general conversions. I mean, sometimes the old Dallas episodes of the late 1980s, they suddenly became very, very bright, huey green, really weird colours and over glitchy colours and stuff, simply because they were being reconverted back into a format for Britain, and it looked awful. I think they changed converters. So I think it's that sort of technology that might be giving these false false impressions and
Possibly. I think really, Neil, have a look. I'll try and find the links, and then I'll send you them and see what you think about them.
Yeah, I mean, my brother has seen. My brother's very interested in astronomy. He's seen the International Space Station fly over. He's worked out when it's going to appear, and he's watched it through his telescope and everything. So
I've seen that. Yeah, I mean, I've seen that.
Yeah, the other thing, getting back to the moon and the talk thing, the delay. Interestingly, when it shows the astronauts on the moon and they're talking back to Houston, there doesn't appear to be a delay, and yet
You're joking.
It's 250,000 miles away or something. So there should be a bloody long delay. Should be at least 10 seconds or something, shouldn't there?
Wow.
Well, I mean, I don't know the exact figures. I know light travels at 186,000 miles per second. So it'd take it more than a second to reach the moon, and then to go through it will go through a transducer, because these are a radio signal, but obviously it has to be converted to sound so that people can speak, just like a telephone or a walkie-talkie. So then there's another delay as that happens, and then the microphone has to be, again, that process is reversed with the microphone. Voices get turned into a radio signal, which then is analog, not digital, goes back to the Houston, and is decoded again. So, yeah, I mean, you consider a few seconds at least between each part of a conversation.
Well, at one company I work for, we spoke to the forces in Afghanistan, and it would take at least 4 seconds, because it's about 4,000 miles away, 4 to 5,000 miles away in Afghanistan to Britain. And so roughly it would take a second for each 1,000 miles. So, and that's for the audio to reach us, and that would be over the latest technology of today rather than 1969 technology. This would be over what they call an ISDN, which is International Standards Digital Network, and it'd be like a posh version of Skype, if you like. But it was very, very high broadcast technology.
We've also got to remember that the computer technology that took man to the moon, allegedly, this is pre-ZX Spectrum, this is pre-Commodore 64, this is your dishwasher has got more computing technology than the lunar landers.
I mean, I've spoken. What you said is absolutely true, Andrew. And Andrew, the thing is, I regularly speak to people all over the world on Skype, and I can speak to people in North America without any noticeable delay or time lag. However, when I speak to people in, say, Southeast Asia, Australia, or New Zealand, there is a noticeable time lag, and we have to be careful with speaking not to interrupt each other and talk over each other.
Exactly. So if you got that from the moon, which is sort of supposedly 238,000 miles away, there's going to be some considerable delay, at least a few minutes, I would have thought. I mean, they talk about delays of when they're sending commands up to the rovers on Mars or something,
oh yeah, that's like hours. That's hours. I mean, there's nothing that scientists could do about this. It's the speed of light. It's basically the speed of electromagnetic waves, and there's nothing you can do about it. Well, in the case of telephones, it's satellite. It goes up to a satellite and it goes down again.
Yeah.
In the case of them.
So that's why they do it in a studio in Nevada desert or something.
Yeah. Well, this is maybe something they didn't. Maybe this was more whistleblowing with people in the inside, as Percy and Bennett say, or maybe it was some kind of maybe it was just an error they never thought of.
I think it possibly is. They slipped up there. Anyway, I think we've reached the end of our program tonight. So I think
we need to get Marcus Allen on the show, Neil. But
please do.
Speaking about it, yeah. Ben, can you pass us his details?
You can contact him just at Nexus Magazine. He'll answer your emails. Nexus Magazine.
But Ben, just quickly before we end the show, were there any documents that you've come across where any of the Nazis actually stated that their goal was to get on the moon? And actually establish a base there?
No, there's none that I'm aware of.
None that you're aware of. Oh, that's a shame.
Maybe they may be out there.
SS Führer Himmler has decided that by
apart from Werner von Braun, his objective was always to get to the moon officially.
They did. Yeah, the Nazis did talk about the conquest of space. They did. They talked about spreading. Yeah, they did. There's no actual plans I'm aware of, but they did make a lot of talk about space. They were very interested in space and rocketry, and of course this other stuff. But no documented plans, as far as I know, of any specific missions.
And Fritz Lang made a movie in the 1920s about a journey to the moon, which
that's fascinating.
They even had their own kind of countdown for the rocket takeoff, which they think the Americans took that idea and threw it into their launch procedures of a countdown because it kind of generated the tension.
That is called Woman in the Moon. It's a very, very interesting film. I think you can get it on YouTube now. It's really old. It's silent. But it actually is surprisingly similar to the way NASA, the practices NASA developed in their space program. And of course, maybe that's because the space program was essentially a media operation. And they actually, maybe the people, because it was about public relations, it was about the Cold War, it was about the space race. So they thought, let's adopt some of the practices that Fritz Lang used in his fictional movies into our real, or should I say, semi-real
pseudo-real.
Yeah, because they had nothing to base it upon otherwise. Anyway, we'd like to say thank you very much indeed for Ben. And do you want to give a quick shout out to anyone, Ben? I know that you talked about earlier going up to Newcastle and things like that. Any shout outs up there you want to give?
Yeah, I want to say a big thank you to Truth Seekers Northeast for what they did, for the brilliant time I had up there. I spent 5 days up there. They were generous, they were kind, they were really, really nice people. I think I've made friends for life there. They felt like family, basically. And they organised some wonderful events for me to speak at. And everyone, they were well attended, and people who went had a great time.
Everyone who I've ever spoken to where they've gone to the northeast of England have loved it and said how friendly the people are up there.
Yeah, I must go up there. We've got a friend who lives in Washington up there, so we must go and visit him sometime. He's always coming to us. It's about time we went to see him. So,
please do, yeah.
So if you guys up there in the northeast want me to come and do a talk, I'll be happy to do one up there for you, and then I can go and see my friend in Washington. Okay. All right, you've been listening to the Paranormal Peep Show with myself and Andrew Chaplin and our special guest, Ben Emlyn Jones. And we've been talking about Nazi saucers and also the Apollo space program. So it's amazing where it all goes. So just like to say thank you very much for one and all for taking part.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. You're welcome, and thank you. I had a lovely time.
You can listen to the replays of all our shows on Podbean, Stitcher, iTunes, and you are listening to the Paranormal Peep Show on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. And it's good night from us all. And
don't forget to join us on Facebook. There's a Paranormal Peep Show Facebook group, so join us on that as well.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.